Welcome back. Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni says it will be his pleasure to take part in talks with people who have disagreed with him. He was speaking at the inauguration of a committee set up to organize a national dialogue which would discuss a transition from his more than 3-decade-long rule. The talks would also focus on the country's ethnic and sectarian divisions and its economic development. Civil society leaders worry that President Museveni's rule, like that of the country's past leader, will not end peacefully. But Mr. Museveni says he's not interested in what he describes as such petty issues and instead is concerned about the long-term security and development of Africa as a whole. The newly inaugurated committee will now put together a framework for talks which should begin after March next year. Morocco hosts the final of an African gaming competition that sees teams from around the continent competing for the win. The event, hosted at a theatre in Casablanca, was organised by a Moroccan telecommunications company INWI to both bring out the best gamers and spread the culture of gaming.
An African gaming competition, the first region-wide event of its kind, saw 7 teams battle it out in an international video game. 3 contestants crouched over computer screens for several hours as an audience watched the players go head-to-head in the multiplayer video game Counter-Strike. Each contestant wanted to get the top spot at the Electronic Sports World Cup, ESWC, the main highlight of the African Gaming Fest. Organizers say that close to 100,000 people dropped in and out of the venue, which also featured exhibitions, a dance contest and cosplay shows.
We wanted this event to be open to the public and to all ages. We are pleasantly surprised that so many people came. Many came with their families.
Winners of ESWC Africa were awarded the title of African Champion and handed a cash prize of $7,000. With the continent's conflict-ridden history and socio-political turmoil, the eSports Championship represented a move towards dialogue and communication. The participating countries included Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, Nigeria, Egypt, Senegal, and Côte d'Ivoire.
A United Nations-supported mobile court has started hearing cases in the town of Bentiu in South Sudan's remote northern region. Citizens say this helps in bringing legal justice back to the town for the first time in more than 4 years.
A convoy of UN vehicles drives into the compound of what was, until recently, an abandoned courthouse in the remote northern town of Bentiu in South Sudan. A man accused of raping and killing a victim in 2018 is led into a refurbished courtroom by a unit of Ghanaian peacekeepers 7 with the United Nations mission in South Sudan. The last official session here was held in December 2013 before civilians and court officials alike fled for their lives.
We are working on the judicial system so that the accused can be tried fast. They should either be charged or released if they didn't commit a crime.
The United Nations mission in South Sudan helped refurbish the courthouse, and now, at the directive of the country's Chief Justice, a mobile court has begun legal proceedings that will see 27 suspects go on trial over a period of 2 weeks. Some of the suspects have waited for a year without trial.
There are places, including Bentiu, where the administration could not bring in a judge to work because there isn't even a place to stay, there is no courthouse, there isn't equipment for the courtroom, or even police officers to work in the court.
The mobile court comprises of another judge in addition to Mazen, 2 prosecutors, 1 investigator, and 2 defense lawyers. Last month, aid agency Médecins Sans Frontières MSF reported that unknown gunmen raped 125 women during a 10-day spree of violence in Bentiu in South Sudan. The victims have come forward, and it's hoped that the ongoing investigations will lead to justice for them.
Finally, on the program, storytellers from across Africa came together in Nairobi, Kenya, to create a modern set of fables and folktales. These old fables address issues such as greed, war, nepotism, and the obsession with fame.
Why don't chickens fly? When did the moon learn to be kind? Answers to these and other mysteries were revealed through the modern fables and folk tales told at the reimagined Storytelling Festival in Nairobi, Kenya. Dozens of raconteurs from across Africa and beyond gathered to bring alive a variety of tales and breathe life into traditions they say are dying out.
Our pasts are important to me, our histories are important to me, and I kind of talked about that a bit in the story that I told on stage, that they connect us to our memories, our ancestry, and they guide us. You know, they teach us on how to live, how to be good people, how to interact with other people, how to interact with the environment. How do we do any of these things? Stories are the ones that give us the guide, that anchor us.
Africa has a rich tradition of oral history and storytelling. Although written history has existed for countries in West Africa, knowledge and morals have mostly been transmitted through oral traditions and performances.
I started this journey about 3 years ago, and I traveled to various small villages to look for East African folktales, and nearly everywhere I went, people had no recollection of their own stories. And the generation who used to tell these stories are now in their 80s. So for me, it was really important to see how do we preserve not only the stories, but in particular, the culture of telling stories orally. Because I think it's very different from watching a television program or reading a book. But to have that storyteller in front of you with an audience to be able to interact is something very precious that we're in danger of losing.
With nods to the giants of African culture like Thomas Sankara, Fela Kuti, Amata Aidu, the stories address issues shared across African societies like corruption, greed, war, nepotism, and the obsession with fame and materialism. So, why don't chickens fly? Because the chicken squandered all the wealth given to him as king of the sky. When the other birds discovered his malfeasance, he was banished from the air and became man's favorite food.
And that's all the program today. Thanks for watching. I'm Teniola Shoboeli.